Today we're going to start learning about ecology. Ecology is the study of interactions between organisms and between organisms and their environment. Your learning goals for today are to describe the levels of ecology, and we're going to learn the terms biosphere, biome, ecosystem, community, and population. We're also going to learn the difference between the different types of consumers: herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and decomposers. And we're going to be able to describe the energy flow from the sun to producers, and from producers to consumers, and from the different levels of consumers in food chains and food webs. Here's a picture of the Earth that was taken by the Apollo astronauts on their way back from the moon. And when we look at the Earth, we see that it's made of different parts. Here we have land. Here's the beautiful blue ocean. We can see clouds in the atmosphere. We can see green here of living things in the rainforest in Africa. And we can even see one of the polar caps here in Antarctica. So we can divide the Earth into what we call spheres. There's the geosphere. That's all the solid parts of the Earth. The atmosphere. That's the gases that surround our planet. The hydrosphere, that's all the water and ice on our planet. And the biosphere, which is all the living things on our planet. And this year we're going to focus on the biosphere. That's all the living things on the planet. That's the study of biology. When we look at the biosphere, we can break it into parts that make it easier to study. The biosphere is all the portions of the planet where life exists. It's all the living things on Earth. It's the easiest way to think about it. And a biome is an area with the same climate and similar plants and animals. If you go to different parts of the Earth that have the same climate, you will find similar plants and animals. For instance, here in Northern Virginia, we're in the temperate deciduous forest biome, and our climate is similar to that in Europe. So in Europe, they're going to have similar plants and animals. Not exactly the same, but very similar. Biomes are made of ecosystems. Ecosystems are all the living things in a particular place in their non-living environment. So let's look at this pond or lake ecosystem. The pond or lake ecosystem would be made up of the water, the rocks, the mud, all the non-living parts, along with all the living parts. The living parts we call the community. The community is all the living things in an ecosystem. And communities are made up of different populations. A population would be one particular species. So let's look at our particular biome, which is the temperate deciduous forest biome. And we might be walking through the woods and we come upon an open field with a pond in the middle. So we would have three different ecosystems there. We would have the forest ecosystem, the meadow ecosystem, and the pond or freshwater lake ecosystem. If we looked at the forest ecosystem, in particular, the community would include all the different trees, the squirrels, the foxes, the owls, everything that lives in the forest. And the community would be made up of different populations. So all the oak trees would be part of one population. All the squirrels would be part of another population. The foxes would all be in one population, and the owls, and so forth. Let's use Mount Vernon High School as an example. The non-living part of Mount Vernon High School ecosystem would be the school itself. And inside the school would be the community, all the living things. And we could break that community down into different populations. We'd have the administrators. That would be one population. We'd have the teachers. That's another population. We'd have the students. That's another population. And the support staff, the bus drivers, the lunch ladies, the janitors, they would make up another population. All these populations would be part of the Mount Vernon High School ecosystem, and the building, the books, the computers, the desks, the pencils, the papers, That would be the non-living part of the Mount Vernon ecosystem. Now, living things need energy, and sunlight is by far the main source of energy for life on Earth. There are some forms of life that don't depend on sunlight, but the vast majority of life on Earth depends on the sun for energy. Autotrophs, or producers, take that sunlight and convert it into food through photosynthesis. So, plants are what we're talking about. So here are some examples of different plants that take the sunlight and convert it into food. Heterotrophs, or consumers, obtain their energy from other living things. Here are some consumers that obtain their energy from other living things. The buffalo gets its energy from eating the producers, the autotrophs, the plants. The fox gets its energy by eating other living things, in this case, this poor little mouse. And here's a fungus, a mushroom, and it gets its energy from decomposing dead things. Now, we have different types of heterotrophs, or consumers. We have herbivores. Herbivores are consumers that eat plants. So this dairy cow and this rabbit get their energy for living by eating plants or producers. We have carnivores, like these lions having a nice lunch on this poor unfortunate zebra. We have omnivores. We're omnivores. Omnivores eat producers and consumers. They eat autotrophs and heterotrophs. So here's a guy enjoying this giant burger. And if we look at the burger, here's a bun that's made from plants. Here's some meat that came from a cow, pickles or cucumbers. So omnivores eat producers and consumers. And we have decomposers. Decomposers break down organic matter. So when you die, decomposers will use your tissues for energy. And the primary consumers are bacteria and fungi. Now hit the pause button, answer these questions, and when you're ready to continue, hit play. So where does virtually all energy for life come from? The sun. What do we call organisms that use sunlight to make their own food? Call them autotrophs, or producers. What do we call organisms that get their food from other living things? We call them heterotrophs, or consumers. All right, so energy from the sun flows through an ecosystem in one direction, from the sun to producers, and then from producers to consumers, and then from one type of consumer to the other. So here's the sun. Producers use the energy to produce food for their own use, and then consumers get their energy from producers. So the autotrophs use the sun to capture the sun's energy and produce food. Heterotrophs, or consumers, then eat the producers. A food chain shows energy flow from producers to consumers in an ecosystem. So the grass captures sunlight, produces food. Rabbits eat the grass. Energy flows from the grass to the rabbits. Foxes eat the rabbits, and energy flows from the rabbit to the fox. You notice the arrow points in the direction that the energy moves. Now we have different levels of consumers. It all starts with the producers. A primary consumer, or a herbivore, is a consumer that eats producers. So here's a little mouse, and he eats grass and seeds and things like that. But the mouse has a bad day, and the snake comes along and eats the mouse. So the snake is what we call a secondary consumer. Secondary consumers eat primary consumers. And the snake has a bad day, and this hawk caught him, and now he's gobbling him up. So the hawk is what we call a third level or tertiary consumer. And energy flows from the producers to the primary consumers, from the primary consumers to the secondary consumers, and from the secondary consumers to the third level or tertiary consumers. Eventually, that energy flows from all these levels to the decomposers. Now, a food web shows the relationship between organisms in an ecosystem. It shows who gets their energy from whom. It's basically a collection of food chains that show the energy flow through the entire ecosystem. So let's look at this one. Here we have the sun, and the arrow points from the sun to the plankton. Plankton are microscopic plants that live in the water that take the sunlight and use it to produce their own food. Notice the arrow always points from the source of energy to who's using it. So from the sun to the plankton. Then the plankton are eaten by the shrimp, and you notice the arrow points from the plankton to the shrimp. And freshwater mollusks or snails eat the plankton, so there's an arrow pointing to them. And then animal plankton, which are little microscopic animals that eat the plant plankton, there's an arrow pointing to them. And we can follow the flow of energy through this entire food web just by following the arrows. The arrows always point to who's getting the energy from whom. So if we look at the heron, we see the heron gets its energy by eating small fish and salmon. We look at the seal gets its energy from the small fish and from the salmon. And the salmon gets its energy from the stoneflies, from small fish, from shrimp, and freshwater mollusks. We can also use a food web to determine what would happen if one of the populations in the community disappeared. Who would suffer if the salmon disappeared? Well, the seals would, because they get energy from salmon, and the heron would suffer because the heron gets energy from the salmon also. Energy pyramids show how much energy is available at each trophic level, and we'll talk about trophic levels in a second. And biomass is the amount of living tissue at each trophic level. So if we took the food web and arranged it according to the producers, the primary consumers or herbivores, carnivores, third level consumers, we could fit it into this energy pyramid. And you notice the energy pyramid is widest at the bottom and smallest at the top. And there's a reason for that. A trophic level is just each step up the energy pyramid. So when we go from producers to herbivores, we've moved from one trophic level to another. If we go from the primary consumers, the herbivores, to secondary consumers, carnivores, we would move up a trophic level. And if we go up finally to the third level consumers or tertiary consumers, we would move up another trophic level. Autotrophs are always at the bottom of the energy pyramid. The producers are always at the bottom. It's really important to remember. Each time we go up a trophic level, or we step up the energy pyramid, 90% of the energy is lost as we move up. So only 10% of the energy in a trophic level is available to the consumers at the next trophic level. That's why there's always going to be more producers than herbivores, and always more herbivores than carnivores. Because each time you step up the trophic level, there's less energy available. All right, so hit the pause button. See if you can answer these questions. And then hit play when you're ready. What level of an energy pyramid is always occupied by autotrophs? That would be the bottom level. What is each level of an energy pyramid called? Called a trophic level. And how much energy is lost as you move up a level on the energy pyramid? 90%. Only 10% of the energy in a trophic level is available to the consumers at the next level up. Thank you very much.